The Galactic Academy of Advanced Studies had seen many species pass through its halls over the past millennium. Tall, short, tentacled, scaled, gaseous, and everything in between. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared Professor Clix-9 for the day he would witness the galaxy's most feared apex predator cower before a human. It started on a Tuesday, which in retrospect should have been warning enough. Tuesdays were notorious for their ability to turn the most mundane situations into absolute disasters. The professor's third eye twitched as he reviewed the day's schedule on his biopad. Advanced xenobiology, followed by interspecies combat theory, and finally the dreaded practical applications seminar. Students. Clix-9 called out, his voice echoing through the laboratory with the authority of someone who had survived 14 different assassination attempts, 3 wars, and 1 particularly brutal faculty meeting. Today we will be studying the Vorthak Prime Hunter specimen designation. Oh, what's the point of these numbers anyway? Let's just call him Big Scary. The assembled students, a mixture of species that would make a diplomat weep with joy at the diversity, leaned forward in their various forms of seating arrangements. Zara, a 6-limbed Keteran with an unfortunate tendency to shed scales when nervous, was already beginning to molt. Clix, whose species name was unpronounceable to anyone lacking 17 tongues, vibrated with excitement. And then there was Nam, a blob-like creature whose intelligence was inversely proportional to his ability to maintain a solid shape, kind of Vorthak Prime Hunter. Clix-9 continued, activating the containment field around a cage that was reinforced with enough alloy to build a small starship, as is considered by many to be the apex predator of the known galaxy. Standing 12 feet tall, equipped with razor-sharp claws that can cut through starship hulls, and possessing reflexes that make light look sluggish, this creature has never been successfully contained for more than, well, we're about to find out. The containment field shimmered and disappeared. Inside the cage, Big Scary stretched to his full, terrifying height. His 4 eyes, each the size of dinner plates, scanned the room with predatory intelligence. His claws extended with a sound like swords being drawn, and his mouth opened to reveal 3 rows of teeth that could probably bite through a small moon. Magnificent, isn't it? Clix-9 said, stepping closer to the cage with the confidence of someone who had tenure and therefore believed himself immortal. Notice the way he assesses each potential threat, calculating the most efficient method of turning us all into afternoon snacks. Big Scary's head swiveled toward the professor, and for a moment the two stared at each other. The silence stretched until Zara's nervous scale shedding reached critical mass and created a small pile on the floor. Now, Clix-9 said, consulting his notes, according to my calculations, this specimen should be able to break free from standard containment in approximately, about 30 seconds ago. The cage door swung open. Big Scary stepped out, his massive frame casting shadows across the laboratory. Several students immediately activated their personal shields, while others began composing what they assumed would be their final messages to loved ones. Nam, ever the optimist, simply oozed backward toward the exit. Fascinating, Clix-9 muttered, scribbling notes frantically. Observe how he doesn't immediately attack. This suggests higher intelligence than previously documented. Perhaps he's savoring the moment, or maybe he's deciding which of us would make the best appetizer. Big Scary took another step forward, his claws clicking against the laboratory floor. The sound was like death knocking at the door, if death had particularly sharp fingernails and stood 12 feet tall. Then the laboratory door opened. "Sorry I'm late," said a cheerful voice. "Traffic was murder getting here from the human quarter." Everyone turned to look at the newcomer. She was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with brown hair tied back in what humans called a ponytail and wearing the standard-issue Academy jumpsuit. She carried a steaming cup of what appeared to be some kind of hot beverage and had the relaxed demeanor of someone who had just finished a pleasant morning jog. "Maya Thompson," she said, extending her hand toward Professor Clix-9. "I'm the new exchange student from Earth. Hope I haven't missed anything important." The professor stared at her outstretched hand, then at Big Scary, who had frozen mid-step, then back at Maya. His three eyes blinked in sequence, a sure sign of cognitive overload. "You're human," he said, as if stating the obvious would somehow make the situation less surreal. "Last time I checked," Maya replied with a grin that showed her teeth. They were small, white, and utterly unremarkable by galactic standards. "Though I haven't had my coffee yet, so my species classification might be subject to change." She took a sip from her cup and made a satisfied humming sound. The effect on Big Scary was immediate and dramatic. The apex predator of the galaxy, the creature that had single-handedly decimated 3 different military outposts, slowly began to back away from the tiny human with the hot beverage. That's not possible," whispered Blix, his 17 tongues all speaking at once in a harmony of disbelief. Maya noticed the enormous predator for the first time and tilted her head with mild interest. "Oh wow, that's a big one. What is it, some kind of really angry space wolf?" "Vorthak Prime Hunter," Clix9 said weakly. "Big apex predator. Galaxy's most feared creature. Currently retreating." "Huh," Maya said, taking another sip of her coffee. "Cute." Big Scary's retreat accelerated. His 4 eyes, which had been calculating the most efficient dismemberment techniques moments before, now darted between Maya and the nearest exit. His claws retracted, his posture shifted from predatory to defensive, and he began making a sound that could only be described as whimpering. "This is impossible," Clix9 declared, his scientific worldview crumbling like a cookie in a black hole. "The Vorthak Prime Hunter fears nothing." "Nothing. It's biologically incapable of retreat." "Maybe he's just shy," Maya suggested, moving closer to get a better look at the creature. Big Scary responded by pressing himself against the far wall, trying to become one with the laboratory's architecture. No, the professor muttered, flipping through his notes frantically. "This doesn't make sense. Humans aren't supposed to be intimidating. You're small, you have no natural weapons, your bite force is pathetic, and your top speed is laughably slow. By all rights, you should be a light snack for something like this." Maya shrugged. "I guess he's just not hungry." She approached Big Scary with the casual confidence of someone who had never been properly introduced to the concept of mortal danger. The creature's whimpering increased in volume and frequency. "Hey there, big guy," she said, extending her hand toward the towering predator. "I'm Maya. Nice to meet you." Big Scary stared at her hand as if it were a weapon of mass destruction. His breathing became rapid and shallow, and one of his eyes began to twitch. After a moment that seemed to stretch for eternity, he slowly, carefully, touched her hand with the tip of one massive claw. The contact lasted for exactly 0.3 seconds before Big Scary jerked his claw back and resumed his position against the wall. "I'll be sweet," Maya said, turning back to the class. "Can I keep him?" "Keep him?" Clix9's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. "You want to keep the apex predator of the galaxy as a pet?" "Well, not a pet exactly," Maya said, considering. "Or like a study buddy. I bet he'd be great at helping me reach high shelves." Big Scary made a sound that was part growl, part whimper, and part existential crisis. He began moving along the wall toward the door, never taking his eyes off Maya. "This is unprecedented," Zara whispered, her scale shedding, reaching historic proportions. "In all recorded history, no creature has ever made a Vorthak Prime Hunter retreat without violence." "Maybe that's the problem," Maya said, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. "Maybe nobody ever tried just being nice to them." As if to prove her point, she pulled a small wrapped object from her pocket. "I brought snacks," she announced. "Anyone want a granola bar?" The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Big Scary's eyes widened in terror, his claws extended to their full length, and he bolted for the door with a speed that defied physics. The laboratory shook as 12 feet of apex predator attempted to fit through a standard-sized doorway, succeeded through sheer determination and possibly some advanced geometry, and disappeared into the corridor beyond. The sound of his retreat echoed through the academy for several minutes, punctuated by the occasional crash as he presumably encountered obstacles in his path to freedom. Well, Maya said, unwrapping her granola bar. That was weird. Professor Clicks-9 stood in the middle of his laboratory, surrounded by his traumatized students, staring at the spot where the galaxy's most feared predator had just been cowering. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence again, faster this time, as his brain attempted to process what had just occurred. "Class dismissed," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. As the students filed out, Nam oozed over to Maya. "How did you do that?" he asked, his gelatinous form quivering with curiosity. Maya shrugged. "I have no idea. Maybe he didn't like my coffee. It is pretty strong." She took another sip, and somewhere in the distance they could hear Big Scary's retreating footsteps falter for a moment before resuming their frantic pace. Or maybe, Maya added with a grin, he's lactose intolerant. The next morning, reports began flooding in from across the academy. Big Scary had been spotted in the cafeteria, hiding under tables whenever Maya walked by. He'd been seen in the library, checking out books on interspecies diplomacy and how to make friends and influence humans. The most disturbing report came from the dormitory security cameras, which had captured footage of the apex predator of the galaxy sitting outside Maya's room, Orcs, apparently standing guard. Professor Clicks-9 found himself in the unusual position of having to explain to the Academy's board of directors why the galaxy's most dangerous predator was now following a human exchange student around like a lost puppy. The conversation had not gone well. "Let me understand this correctly," Director Yix Prime had said, his tentacles writhing with barely contained frustration. "You released a Vorthak Prime Hunter in your classroom?" For educational purposes, Clicks-9 had replied defensively. "And instead of devouring your students, it ran away from a human." "That's an accurate summary, yes. And now it's living in our dormitory complex. Technically, he's living in the ventilation system above our dormitory complex. But he does seem to be house-trained." The director's tentacles had gone through several colors that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum. "This is a disaster. Do you have any idea what the insurance implications are? We can't have apex predators wandering the halls, even if they are apparently terrified of students from Earth." "But I'm still working on understanding the mechanism," Clicks-9 had said. "My preliminary hypothesis is that humans somehow emit a pheromone that triggers a fear response in Vorthak Prime Hunters." "And your plan for testing this hypothesis?" "I've requested additional human exchange students." The director's tentacles had turned a color that was roughly equivalent to what humans might call apoplectic purple. Meanwhile, Maya had been trying to adjust to life at the academy, which was complicated by the fact that she had apparently acquired a 12-foot-tall shadow. Big Scary followed her everywhere, always maintaining a distance of exactly 23 feet, except when she was eating, and in which case he increased the distance to 37 feet. "It's kind of sweet, actually," Maya told her roommate, Kira, a crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic frequencies. "He's like a really big, really scary therapy dog." Kira's response was a musical note that roughly translated to "You're insane, but I admire your optimism." Maya had tried various approaches to befriend her unwilling stalker. She'd left snacks outside her door, which Big Scary had approached with the caution of a bomb disposal expert. She'd attempted to engage him in conversation, which had resulted in him hiding behind a decorative plant that was significantly smaller than he was. She'd even tried ignoring him completely, which had only made him more anxious. "I think he wants to be friends," Maya explained to Professor Clicks-9 during their third emergency meeting. "But he's just too scared to admit it." "Scared?" Clicks-9 repeated. "This creature has terrorized star systems. It once ate an entire space station." "That was probably just a misunderstanding," Maya said. "Maybe he was hangry." "Hangry? Hungry and angry. It's a human thing. We get cranky when we haven't eaten." Clicks-9 made a note on his biopad. "Fascinating. And you believe this explains his aggressive behavior? Has anyone ever tried feeding him something that wasn't, people?" The professor paused in his note-taking. "That's actually an interesting question. According to our records, Vorthak prime hunters are strict carnivores with a preference for sentient prey. But have you ever actually tested that? I mean, maybe he's just been eating people because that's what everyone expects him to do. You're suggesting that the apex predator of the galaxy has been following a diet based on social expectations rather than biological necessity. Stranger things have happened, Maya said. I once knew a guy who thought he was allergic to gluten for 15 years. Turns out he was just eating bad bread. Professor Clix9 stared at her for a long moment. You want to try feeding the Vorthak prime hunter? What, exactly? I was thinking pizza, Maya said. Everyone likes pizza. And that was how the Galactic Academy of Advanced Studies found itself in the unprecedented position of ordering 37 large pizzas for delivery to a ventilation shaft. The pizza delivery was handled by a robotic service, which was probably for the best since Big Scary had been spotted pacing the corridors earlier that day, apparently working up the courage to approach Maya's latest peace offering. The boxes were placed in a neat stack outside Maya's dormitory room, along with a note that read, "For my new friend. Hope you like pepperoni." What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for decades to come. Security footage showed Big Scary emerging from the ventilation system at 11:47 p.m., moving with the stealth of a creature that had spent its entire life perfecting the art of not being seen. He approached the pizza boxes with extreme caution, circling them 3 times before finally reaching out with one massive claw to lift the top box. The scent hit him immediately. His 4 eyes widened, his nostrils flared, and he made a sound that was part growl, part purr, and part religious experience. He opened the box with the delicacy of a surgeon, revealing the cheesy, saucy, pepperoni-covered masterpiece within. He took a bite. The change was immediate and dramatic. Big Scary's entire posture shifted from predatory to something approaching euphoric. His claws retracted, his breathing slowed, and he sat down in the middle of the corridor with the pizza box in his lap, methodically working his way through what was probably the first non-sentient meal of his adult life. By morning, all 37 boxes were empty, and Big Scary was sitting outside Maya's door with what could only be described as a food coma. When she emerged for her morning coffee, she found him there, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and looking more content than any apex predator had a right to be. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "I see you found the pizza." Big Scary looked up at her with something approaching gratitude in his 4 eyes. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. After a moment, he carefully picked up one of the empty boxes and held it out to her. "You want more?" Maya asked. Big Scary nodded. "Okay," Maya said, pulling out her communicator. "But next time we're trying Chinese food." And that was how the galaxy's most feared apex predator discovered that he had been living his entire life with undiagnosed dietary restrictions and a severe case of social anxiety. The news spread through the academy like wildfire, then through the academic community, then through the galaxy at large. The Vorthak prime hunter, terror of the spaceways, bane of civilizations, had been pacified by pizza and kindness. Sales of Italian food spiked across 3 sectors. The Galactic Council issued a statement about the importance of dietary diplomacy. And somewhere in the depths of space, other Vorthak prime hunters began to wonder if there might be an alternative to their traditional lifestyle of cosmic terror. But all of that would come later. For now, Maya Thompson sat in her dormitory room, sharing breakfast with a 12-foot-tall apex predator who had just discovered that pepperoni was his favorite topping, and wondering what other misunderstood creatures might be wandering the galaxy. Just waiting for someone to offer them a slice of pizza and a chance at friendship. It was going to be an interesting semester. 3 weeks after the Great Pizza Incident, as it had come to be known throughout the academy, Maya Thompson found herself in the unusual position of being the galaxy's first accredited monster whisperer. It wasn't an official title, mind you, but when the Galactic Council creates a new diplomatic position specifically for one person, titles tend to become somewhat flexible. "I still can't believe they're paying me to make friends with scary aliens," Maya said, scratching Big Scary behind what she had determined were his ears. The massive predator purred like a contented cat, if cats were 12 feet tall and had previously terrorized star systems. Professor Clix-9 watched this interaction with the fascination of someone whose entire understanding of biology had been turned upside down and thoroughly scrambled. His latest research paper, titled Dietary Diplomacy and the Behavioral Modification of Apex Predators Through Carbohydrate Introduction, had been rejected by 14 different scientific journals on the grounds that it was too ridiculous to be real. The Galactic Council wants to meet with you, he informed Maya, waving a biopad that was flashing with the urgency of a dying star. Apparently there's been a development. Maya looked up from where she was showing Big Scary how to play a human card game called Go Fish. The Predator had proven surprisingly adept at it, probably because his 4 eyes gave him an unfair advantage in detecting tells. What kind of development? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The kind that involves 3 more Vorthak Prime Hunters showing up at the Academy's front door, apparently looking for pizza, Clix-9 replied, his 3 eyes blinking in the rapid sequence that indicated impending nervous breakdown. Oh, Maya said. That's actually kind of cute. Cute. Clix-9's voice cracked like a teenager whose voice was changing in the middle of a presentation. There are 4 apex predators on this station, and you think it's cute? Well, they're not really apex predators anymore, are they? Maya pointed out. They're more like really big exchange students with dietary issues. As if summoned by her words, the laboratory door opened to reveal 3 more massive figures. They were similar to Big Scary in size and general terrifying appearance, but each had distinctive features that made them individuals rather than generic monsters. One had stripes running down his sides, another had what appeared to be natural armor plating, and the third had an extra set of arms that he was using to nervously fidget with a small object. Hello, said the striped one, his voice surprisingly soft for something that could probably bench press a small spacecraft. We heard there was pizza? Maya beamed at them like a kindergarten teacher welcoming new students. Of course. I'm Maya. What are your names? The 3 newcomers exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey both terror and hope. The striped one stepped forward first. My designation is Vorthak Prime Hunter 7739 Alpha, but he paused, looking uncertain. I've always thought of myself as Stripes. Stripes is a great name, Maya said warmly. And you too? The armored one shuffled his feet, creating small dents in the laboratory floor. Tank, he said quietly. I like the sound of it. The one with extra arms held up the object he'd been fidgeting with. It was a small, handmade sculpture that looked like it might be a flower. I'm Craft. I make things. Professor Clix-9 stared at the scene unfolding before him. 4 of the galaxy's most feared predators were standing in his laboratory, introducing themselves with nicknames and sharing hobbies like they were at some kind of intergalactic summer camp. This is impossible, he muttered, making frantic notes on his biopad. Vorthak Prime Hunters don't have hobbies. They don't make art. They don't give themselves cute names. Maybe that's because nobody ever asked them what they wanted to be called, Maya suggested. Big Scary here told me his real name is actually Gentle. Apparently he's been trying to get people to call him that for about 200 years. Gentle, formerly known as Big Scary, nodded enthusiastically. Nobody ever listens, he said, his voice a rumbling bass that somehow managed to sound wistful. They always just scream and run away. Well, I'm listening now, Maya said, and the effect on all 4 creatures was immediate. They straightened up, their postures becoming less defensive and more hopeful. Now, Maya continued, who wants to help me order dinner? I was thinking we could try something other than pizza tonight. Maybe Thai food? The next few hours passed in a blur of cultural exchange that would have made the Academy's anthropology department weep with joy if they hadn't all been hiding in the secure Tua bunker 3 levels down. Maya introduced the 4 former apex predators to concepts like spicy food, sharing and saying please and thank you. In return, they shared stories about their lives that painted a very different picture of the galaxy's most feared species. We don't actually like eating people, Stripes explained between bites of pad thai. It's just what we're supposed to do. What everyone expects. The loneliness is the worst part, Tank added, carefully manipulating his chopsticks with claws that could cut through steel. Nobody ever wants to talk to us. They just shoot first and ask questions later. Kraft nodded, still working on his sculpture. I've been trying to make friends for 3 centuries, he said. But every time I approach someone, they assume I want to eat them. Have you tried bringing gifts? Maya asked. Humans usually appreciate small gestures of friendship. I tried that once, Kraft said, holding up his sculpture. I made a beautiful statue for the governor of Kepler Prime. Took me 6 months to carve it from a single piece of asteroid rock. What happened? Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. He called in the military, Kraft said sadly. They thought it was some kind of psychological warfare. Nobody bothered to ask if it was supposed to be a flower. Maya examined the sculpture more closely. It was indeed a flower, carved with incredible detail and obvious love. The petals were perfectly formed, the stem gracefully curved, and the entire piece radiated a sense of peace and beauty that was completely at odds with the creature who had created it. It's beautiful, she said, and meant it. You're an artist. Kraft's 4 eyes widened with surprise and delight. Really? You think so? I know so, Maya said firmly. This is museum-quality work. The effect of her words was immediate and profound. Kraft began to glow, literally glow, with a soft bioluminescent light that Maya had never seen before. The other 3 Vorthak looked at him with amazement. I've never seen that before, Gentle said. What's happening to you? I think, Kraft said, his voice filled with wonder, I think I'm happy. Professor Clicks 9, who had been documenting everything with the dedication of a scientist witnessing the birth of a new star, nearly dropped his biopad. Bioluminescent joy response, he muttered. I need to contact the xenobiology department immediately. Maybe later, Maya said. Right now I think we need to have a serious conversation about the future. She looked around at the 4 creatures who had, in the span of a few hours, gone from being the galaxy's most feared predators to being, well, friends. It was hard to think of them as monsters when Stripes was carefully washing dishes in the laboratory sink, Tank was organizing the takeout containers by size, and Kraft was showing Gentle how to hold a carving tool without accidentally destroying it. Here's the thing, Maya said, settling into what she privately called her serious voice. You guys can't keep living like this, hiding in ventilation shafts, eating people you don't want to eat, being alone all the time. It's not healthy. But what choice do we have? Stripes asked. Everyone in the galaxy is terrified of us. That's because they don't know the real you, Maya said. They only know the stories, the legends, the fear, but stories can be changed. How? Tank asked, his voice skeptical but hopeful. Maya grinned, and there was something in her expression that reminded everyone present that humans, for all their apparent fragility, were capable of absolutely terrifying levels of determination when they set their minds to something. We're going to throw a party, she announced. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when someone suggests something so outrageous that it takes everyone's brain a moment to process it. A party? Gentle asked finally. The biggest, most spectacular interspecies friendship party the galaxy has ever seen, Maya said, warming to her theme. We'll invite everyone. Students, faculty, diplomats, journalists. We'll have food from every world, music from every culture. And we'll show everyone that the galaxy's most feared predators are actually just really big people who want to make friends. They'll never come, Stripes said, though he sounded like he wanted to believe. They'll come, Maya said confidently, because we're going to make them an offer they can't refuse. What kind of offer? Professor Clicks 9 asked, though he sounded like he was afraid of the answer. Free food, Maya said, and a chance to be part of history. When was the last time anyone got to attend the first ever Apex Predator Friendship Festival? The planning took 2 weeks, and by the end of it, the Academy was buzzing with excitement and terror in roughly equal measure. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that the human exchange student who had somehow befriended 4 Vorthak prime hunters was throwing a party, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. The guest list grew from a few dozen Academy personnel to several hundred beings from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council sent representatives. The media arrived in force. 3 different military organizations showed up, ostensibly for security but really because they wanted to see if the rumors were true. This is either going to be the most successful diplomatic event in galactic history, Director Yix Prime said, watching the preparations from his office window, or the most spectacular disaster. Probably both, Professor Clicks9 replied, checking his biopad for the 100th time that day. Maya has a talent for making the impossible seem routine. Down in the Academy's main hall, which had been converted into Party Central, Maya was putting the finishing touches on what she privately considered her masterpiece. The 4 Vorthak were helping with decorations, their massive size making them perfect for hanging streamers and arranging furniture. Gentle was carefully adjusting the lighting, Stripes was taste testing the buffet, Tank was setting up the sound system, and Kraft was creating ice sculptures that were already being photographed by early arriving journalists. "Are you nervous?" Maya asked Gentle as they worked together to arrange the final table settings. "Terrified," he admitted. "What if they don't like us? What if they run away? What if this whole thing is a mistake?" "Then we'll deal with it," Maya said simply. "But I don't think it will be. You know why." Why? "Because you're not monsters," Maya said. "You're just people who happen to be really, really big. And once everyone sees that, everything changes." The first guests began arriving at sunset, and Maya had to admit that the sight was somewhat intimidating. Beings from dozens of different worlds, many of whom had never been in the same room together, were filing into the Academy's main hall with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely contained panic. The 4 Vorthak stood near the entrance, wearing matching name tags that Maya had insisted on. They looked like bouncers at the galaxy's most unusual nightclub, except that bouncers generally didn't offer homemade cookies to incoming guests. "Welcome to the Apex Predator Friendship Festival," Gentle said to each new arrival, his voice carefully modulated to sound as non-threatening as possible. "I'm Gentle. Can I interest you in some appetizers?" The reactions were everything Maya had hoped for and more. Initial terror gave way to confusion, confusion gave way to curiosity, and curiosity gave way to genuine interest as guests realized that the galaxy's most feared predators were actually offering them snacks and making small talk about the weather. "This is unprecedented," whispered Ambassador Flux, a gaseous being from the Nebula territories who had initially refused to attend until Maya personally guaranteed his safety. "I've been in diplomatic service for 3 centuries, and I've never seen anything like this." "That's because nothing like this has ever happened before," Maya replied, watching as Kraft showed a group of crystalline beings how to carve decorative patterns in ice. "Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to do something completely different." As the evening progressed, something magical began to happen. The initial tension in the room gave way to genuine celebration as guests realized that the 4 Vorthak were not only harmless but actually quite entertaining. Stripes turned out to be a gifted storyteller, Tank had an encyclopedic knowledge of galactic music, and Kraft was creating personalized sculptures for anyone who asked. "I have to admit," said General Corks, the military representative who had arrived expecting to coordinate an evacuation, "this is not what I was expecting." "What were you expecting?" Maya asked, offering him a plate of what she had learned was his species' favorite appetizer. "Carnage mostly," he said, accepting the food with a slightly embarrassed expression. "Maybe some light genocide. Definitely not this." This was Gentle teaching a group of small, furry creatures from the outer rim how to play charades, while they giggled and applauded his increasingly elaborate gestures. The evening's crowning moment came when Maya took the stage to address the assembled crowd. The hall fell silent as she looked out at the hundreds of beings who had come to witness this unprecedented event. "3 weeks ago," she began, "I walked into a classroom and met someone who was supposed to be a monster. He was 12 feet tall, had claws that could cut through steel, and everyone in the galaxy was terrified of him. But you know what I saw when I looked at him? She paused, looking over at Gentle, who was watching her with an expression of hope and terror. I saw someone who was lonely, she continued. Someone who wanted friends but didn't know how to make them. Someone who had been judged by his appearance instead of his character. And I thought, that's not a monster. That's just a person who needs a friend. She gestured to the four Vorthak, who were standing together near the stage, their massive forms somehow managing to look both impressive and vulnerable. These four beings have spent centuries being feared and hunted, not because they're evil, but because they're different. Because they're big and scary looking and nobody ever bothered to ask them what they actually wanted. Well, I asked, and you know what they wanted? The hall was completely silent now, hundreds of beings hanging on her every word. They wanted the same thing we all want, Maya said. I wanted to belong. They wanted to be understood. I wanted friends who would accept them for who they are, not judge them for what they look like. She smiled, and her voice grew warmer. Tonight we've proven that friendship is possible across any divide. Is that understanding can overcome fear. That sometimes the scariest-looking person in the room is actually the one who needs a friend the most. The applause started slowly, with one being clapping, then another, then more, but until the entire hall was filled with the sound of hundreds of different species showing their appreciation in their own unique ways. Some clapped, some whistled, some made harmonic sounds, and some simply glowed with approval. But the most important reaction came from the four Vorthak themselves. They stood together, looking out at a crowd that was applauding them not for their fearsome reputation, but for their courage in showing their true selves. And for the first time in their long lives, they felt like they truly belonged. Thank you, Gentle said, his voice carrying across the hall without any amplification. Thank you for giving us a chance to be more than monsters. The party continued long into the night, but Maya knew that the real celebration was just beginning. Word would spread throughout the galaxy about what had happened at the Academy. Other misunderstood beings would hear the story and realize that they, too, might have a chance at friendship and acceptance. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Maya found herself standing in the empty hall with her four friends, looking at the remnants of what had been the most successful diplomatic event in galactic history. So, she said, what do we do next? Next? Stripes asked. Well, we can't stop here, Maya said. There are probably hundreds of other species out there who are misunderstood, lonely, or just need someone to offer them pizza and a chance at friendship. You want to do this again? Tank asked, sounding amazed. I want to do this everywhere, Maya said. Every world, every station, every place where someone is being judged by their appearance instead of their character. She looked around at her four friends, who were regarding her with expressions of awe and gratitude. Besides, she added with a grin, I've always wanted to see more of the galaxy. And now I have the perfect tour guides. As they stood there in the empty hall, surrounded by the detritus of the most successful interspecies friendship party in galactic history, Maya Thompson realized that she had found her calling. Not as a student, not as an exchange participant, but as something entirely new, a bridge between worlds, a translator of hearts, and a firm believer in the radical idea that everyone deserves a friend. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place, and it all started with pizza.